What is going on, everybody? floopydonkey here again to help improve your Madden franchises. Let's talk about some auto subs. One thing a lot of people do not actually talk about in the game is how to make sure that your players are substituted correctly. You're going to go over to My Coach and then you're going to go to auto subs. Now, what this does is this tells you how often your players will get subbed in and out based on position. And here you see I have an offense and defense, and these are the sliders that I am currently using, and I think they work pretty well. I base these sliders off of the snap counts or percentage of snaps played that were tracked by the NFL this past year in 2021. Of course, we'll go through each of these just so you understand, but basically for these sliders, what you need to understand is sub out. Okay, we're going to talk about sub out first. Is at what point will your quarterback or player get subbed out of the game based off of their fatigue level or their stamina? So once their fatigue level drops, and I think this is for 50%. So in the quarterback's case, once his stamina gets to 50%, he is going to get subbed out, and he will not get subbed back in until it's at 80. Now, you might think, oh, that's way too long for my quarterback to be out, but quarterbacks aren't ever going to get to really 50% unless something crazy is happening. So I bumped this down because it was at 60. Most of these sliders were set from 80 to 60, I believe. 80 in, 60 out. And I just bumped that down just so your quarterback will never get pretty much subbed out of the game. Same thing for offensive line down here at the bottom. For running backs. Now, running backs are a little bit different because you're going to base this off of how often do you want your running back subbed in and out. If you have a player like Christian McCaffrey or Ezekiel Elliott or Dalvin Cook who do not have really a great solid backup behind them, or if you want to have a running back that is always on the field, of course, you're going to decrease the sub out. You would probably drop this, a whole lot lower. Now, I did do this with Christian McCaffrey, and just for reference, let's take a look right here. And this is 1 year with Christian McCaffrey at those current sub in and sub out ratings, and he ran for 1,400 yards, 5.5 yards a carry, 9 touchdowns. You see Mike Davis here got touches and seemed to be kind of that goal line back for the Panthers in this scenario. So even somebody like Christian McCaffrey, who usually averages the most snaps per offensive player, percentage snaps for his offense at the running back position, he still got a ton of carries. And he even got some catches here, which is very hard for running backs, especially when you're doing simulation. So you saw there, these 85 in and 70 out, I think work very well, and you'll actually get to see your backup running backs in the game a lot more. Now, of course, like I said, if you do not like that and you want your quarterback or your running back to stay in a lot longer, then you're going to bump this sub out as low as you want to. Just remember that if you're keeping your players in the game for a longer amount of time while they're fatiguing, you do run the risk of them getting hurt. So as that fatigue level goes down, their injury risk goes up. So that's something that you want to keep in mind. So somebody like a running back or a wide receiver or a defensive lineman or a linebacker, if you keep them in the game for too long, once they're getting tired, they do run the risk of getting hurt a lot more often than if you have their, sub out percentage a lot higher so they can get some rest. Just something to keep in mind. Now for our wide receivers play a very, very long time in the NFL, and they play a majority of their snaps. So this is why we have the sub out at 60 and sub in at 70, meaning that they're going to get subbed out once they get to that 60 mark, but we're going to put them right back in when they get to 70 because wide receivers want to be on the field. They want to get as many touches as possible, and they can't get touches if they're not on the field. Fullbacks and offensive line are much like our quarterbacks. They never get subbed out. Fullbacks are very rarely in the game, so when they're in the game, we want them to be there. And then offensive line, same thing. They're not getting rotated in and out very much, right? Most offensive linemen are staying in for the majority of the game. Now, defense is another story. Defense outside of your secondary, and we'll go ahead and cover those, corners and safeties, they stay in 95+% of the time. They're in there the majority of the time. And all I did was bump down the sub out to 60 from 70. Now, if we talk about defensive line, with defensive tackles and defensive ends, they are going to be subbed in and out a lot more often than one might think or one might have already noticed in Madden. So what we did was we changed the defensive tackle sub out to actually 70 so that they're getting subbed out quite more often, but then they're going to get put right back in once they get to 80. For our defensive ends, we bumped that down a little bit more. Defensive ends stay in the game usually a lot more often. So if we think of the players like Hassan Reddick, JJ Watt, and we're not going to use Aaron Donald in this scenario because he's a defensive tackle, but those end rushers usually stay in the game the majority of the time. The team wants them on the end, rushing the quarterback as often as possible. And then again, like I said, for defensive tackles, they're usually not in the game quite as often as defensive ends, except for outliers like Aaron Donald and Ndamukong Suh. You really don't, or Fletcher Cox, you don't really see defensive tackles constantly on the line. They're getting subbed in and out quite often. And then for linebackers, again, linebackers, usually the captains of the defense, Bobby Wagner's, Levante Davids, Henry Kendricks. They're going to be in the game the majority of the time. So we've got them only getting subbed out once their stamina gets to 60, and then we'll sub them back in once they get to 80. Give them time to rest and recover, but they very rarely should get down to 60. But again, just remember, the lower you've got that sub out, the more often they can potentially get hurt. So just keep that in the back of your mind. And also, these do matter if you want your snap counts to be exactly like they are in the NFL, that you need to make sure that you have your quarter links at a time that closely resemble the amount of snaps played in the NFL. I currently have mine at 10 minutes with a 20-second runoff, so I think that's pretty good. I think I'll get the right at 120 to 140 snaps or plays throughout the game, which is similar to an NFL game-like experience. Guys, I hope you learned something. If you like these sliders, use them. Let me know if they work. If you make any adjustments or tweaks to them, let me know as well. And I hope this helped you out. I'll catch everybody later. Floopy Donkey out.